Welcome to the Government CIO Agile Advocate Podcast. I'm here with Kendall Krebs, Technical Advisor for Infrastructure and Operations for the Veterans Administration. Thanks for coming down to the podcast, Kendall.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So as always, I'd like to give my guests a chance to give their background and description of how they got to where they are today.
So I actually started my career as an intern at the VA's Financial Services Center back in the mid to early 2000s. And in that role, I started on the IT help desk there at the Financial Services Center. And, kind of a traditional role to get started in an organization, front lines of IT. Eventually, I worked my way into a project management position at the Financial Services Center. And we were really in the process of figuring out how to tackle some of our big initiatives with a more professional project management approach. So got in on the ground floor of the PMP pattern and kind of that traditional waterfall pattern that we were adopting at that time in the organization. And I think I saw both the good and the bad of that approach. One of the things I think I always struggled with was, as a project manager, you become the answer guy. And one of the things that's attracted me to the DevSecOps approach and building Agile into our organization is really changing that dynamic where, the project manager really shifts away into the team working with themselves and helping organize themselves. And I've seen that change when I've gone from traditional project management to an Agile approach, where team members are really bought into what they're doing. So I worked there, I learned some lessons. Eventually, I found my way into a role that turned out to be in the front office of the field operations part of IT. And that happened in 2008, which was just a couple years after IT had actually centralized in VA. And so in that organization, we were actually bringing together around 150 VA medical centers, the regional offices, a lot of the staff offices, and the IT support that historically had been independent at those locations, bringing that into a centralized structure. And in that role, I saw how some organizations had really invested a lot in their IT environments, and others had maybe not had as much or a common approach. And so that meant that we potentially had different experiences that could happen across our organization, and kind of areas that were really bought into IT and those that weren't. And eventually I came into a role working on really the operations and maintenance side of products that we offer in IT. And I think in that role, I saw how we were kind of stagnating a little bit on our products. We'd gone down this pattern where, as an organization, we were building things, but then once we built them, we deployed them.
Did you just sustain them and put
then
them
we
in a
just
nursing
sustained
home?
them, right? Yeah. And that wasn't working for us either, right? And eventually, I found myself in some different roles in the organization, and currently that's in infrastructure operations. And I'm really excited about that, because this is a great time for IT as we look to position ourselves toward a customer-centric view using DevSecOps. And I think the difference is we're looking at these products as long-lived things, right? So we're not taking them to the nursing home.
A product is
right?
never done until it's taken out of service.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's a great thing. I mean, we've been talking to a lot of your folks across the VA in different product teams. They're not completely focused on a product. They're still doing project, time and budget. But one of the things that we see, though, is that some are more mature than others, and some of them in the service area and infrastructure. Do you think maturing that service, and we've talked about this, right, that your infrastructure essentially is like an OS of, an operating system of the VA IT. You give all those common services across. Do you think that helps that organization mature a bit faster towards DevOps as your organization matures?
Yeah, so I think one of our goals is to reposition and think about platforms as products in the organization. At the same time as we're looking at those customer-facing software products that we deliver as products, right? So looking at the platform's tool stack, not as individual technology stovepipes, right, that have to be managed by the application team. But really our goal with platforms is letting the application teams focus on the applications and the data layer, while the platforms come together. So the technology stack, the OS layer, the runtime environments, the middleware, right? We want those to really be a packaged together set so the application teams can focus on their applications.
Much like I never worry about saving a file, how it's done, when it goes to the file system.
Exactly.
I just know that it's done.
Yeah.
We've talked about this too. You face a lot of challenges, I think, that are not what an application faces. An application has that, I think, a benefit of a single swim lane, somewhat focused on that. You have multiple swim lanes coming at you. Tell us about some of the challenges in that.
Yeah. So I think, platforms and hosting is also evolving right now as we move forward. The proliferation of low code, no code solutions that are out there changes the paradigm that we're working in, right? But we have to look at those as investments that we're making in an organization. If we're getting involved in a low code, no code platform, we have to understand what it means to build in that platform, what the switching costs are when we need to change or, move on to another platform because the licensing model might change on that.
You're going shoulder to shoulder and being married somewhat to this product and this team. Right?
Yeah. And then when we think about how we've historically hosted in data centers, right, the cloud changes that for us too, right? So if we're doing traditional forklifts from traditional applications right into the cloud, we might not realize as an organization some of the benefits that we can capture as the cloud.
If you realize benefits from doing that, you've beaten what everybody else. Everybody's seeing forklift doesn't really give me anything.
Right. So
it's
now
just a new place.
So now we've got to talk about containerization and what's our strategy going to be for getting the biggest bang for our buck as an organization when we move to these new opportunities that the cloud presents for us. And I think it's an exciting time for infrastructure teams, but it's also a really scary time because the dynamics are changing in a way that I think it's really fast for us. And I think, historically, we might not have thought of ourselves needing to be involved in some of these new and emerging low-code, no-code platforms, but we need to be there. This is a way that we host. We have to integrate these tools with other tools that we've invested in the organization. And same with containerization. It's a different way of approaching hosting where we're looking to let the application teams focus on the application. We build and manage the containers. Ultimately, we want automated provisioning, right? And as we move down that path, that's a very different way for the organization to work, where we're kind of decoupling in many ways the way we execute infrastructure.
Well, we just came out of a talk with Nicholas Schlon, and Air Force is moving really hard that way. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of great opportunities. I think that's an old Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times. It's not always a great thing, right? It's a difficult thing, but the challenges are definitely, the opportunities are there.
Yeah.
And the way to be able to provision and evolve, I think is going to change the role of operations. So if there was one thing you could do, you wave your magic wand, and you could have your entire organization understand the challenge, some challenge that you have in infrastructure and operations, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's really bringing together the technology stack to deliver those platforms as a service.
Even when I'm part of your product, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're saying?
Yeah. I think bringing those things together in the organization and presenting ourselves in a little bit different way to the applications teams, right? So that the goal in mind here is we really want the apps teams to be able to focus on the apps and the apps functionality, while the infrastructure teams and the platform teams take care of those infrastructure environments.
So you want a different relationship between ops and dev?
Yeah.
What a crazy thought.
Yeah, right.
Almost like DevOps. And then throw in security too, just for the heck of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and when we start talking about containerization, now we can talk about wrapping security around those containers, baking it in there. And, we'll still have application security we're going to have to take care of, but building that in and baking that in and getting those containers accredited and, managing that as part of the infrastructure strategy.
I think containers scare people because they don't quite understand them. If they really dig into it, they realize they've been around forever. Docker and the rest make it look prettier. But they do provide an incredible opportunity for infrastructure to give me a consistent infrastructure that's secure, and I know it all the time. One of those security challenges too, right, is you build something for 9 months, and then you give it to me, and then you want me to review the entire thing of 9 months of work in a couple of weeks or maybe days, which, it usually takes months. And then the vulnerabilities get out there, the bad guys put something else, and all of a sudden you're not going to make it.
Right.
So if you could do that in that continuous ATO that we were just talking about, that's an incredible opportunity to deliver when you want to, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is the big one. What's the single biggest challenge facing the VA and the DevOps transformation?
Yeah, this is a tough question, and there's a lot of good answers for it. So I think, a lot of times we talk about culture, we talk about building in agility to our teams, but, I think those are all true, right? We're going to talk about culture. We're working on culture. I think our leadership in VA IT has done a fantastic job empowering the teams and the organization to figure out what DevSecOps means to us and finding our path there, right? There's not a single right answer down this path. But ultimately, I think the really big challenge for our organization is the pace of change. So, a few years ago, we wouldn't have been sitting here talking about containers the way we're talking about them today, right? And I think as an organization, that means the entire workforce, we all have to keep up, right? So the answers aren't going to come down from the heavens from leadership and tell us this is what DevSecOps is going to look like in the organization. We're really a part of figuring that out. And I think what's exciting is our leadership have empowered change teams from across the organization to get involved in this transformation. And, we've been talking this week with a lot of the leaders of those change teams. And I think we're seeing there's an energy building as we look at new ways to do things. And we're seeing where we've got to cross-pollinate and share ideas, find those pockets of innovation that are happening in the organization, and figure out how can we scale those across the VA.
And just let everybody know, it's amazing, any organization, big, somewhat large, and gigantic ones, they don't know what they do. Mm-hmm. And there's good things happening at the VA. And people need to know about that.
Yeah.
We need to get the best practices out and actually tell people how it's done.
Yeah.
And what it's going to give you.
Yeah. And I think when people put eyes on that, our leadership was talking about a trip they took to look at a project team that's doing infrastructure as code, using containerization, and what they've done there. You can just see
them go, oh, wow, it does work.
Right. This is a game changer, right? For the organization.
Infrastructure as code. I will tell you in many of my podcasts, that I think is going to be like the microchip. It's going to change things. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's great when you see management go, oh, light up, and they understand and they make the connection and connect the dots, and they're like, oh, wait a minute. That really changes the way I can actually deliver.
Right, right.
So this is kind of a loaded question here. I want to try to get these teams together, and then I ask this kind of question. Do you think that it's sometimes you get too much focus on the dev of the DevOps?
It's a great question.
Infrastructure gets left behind. We do all the hard work after you glory boys do all the development.
Yeah, so I think with software, we're really talking about the delivery of capabilities to our customers. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. My spouse used to actually work for VA as a clinician. And in that role, most of her interactions and things she was seeing with IT, they were part of the software delivery. And I would hear at night, where we had...
You actually were living with a customer.
I was living with a customer, right? It makes it real and keeps you very humble in IT as well. But I think that was really powerful to have that experience and have her reminding me of what it means to her to deliver IT. She doesn't care about containerization, right? She doesn't care about that technology stack within the infrastructure that I'm talking about. She cares, does that software work for me today? Did my ticket get routed to the right person to get my issue resolved? And I think, that's an important reminder to all of us. DevSecOps is really about positioning ourselves with the customer, right? So, I think we've been building on different frameworks and different ideas. I think, a lot of us, VA invested very heavily in ITIL. And a lot of us got trained up on ITIL v3. We see an evolution happening in ITIL v4, right? But inside our organization, I think it's important to remember that those things build upon each other. ITIL really helped us figure out our technology stack, how we work with each other, how we do change requests, why that matters, why incidents are different than requests, and why it's important for us to sift those things so that we can do like true problem management, right? These are important things, but I think DevSecOps, the great game changer here is really positioning ourselves for the customers. And I think as you see our product line transformation and the way we're trying to position IT, I think IT is really trying to rise up and meet the customer organizations to figure out what they need from us, not how do we need to organize ourselves in IT, right?
Right.
Like that's not the main thing.
Right. Like I really care how you organize.
Right.
Yeah. So I came from a customer product based, and it's amazing that I've actually asked some teams who your customer is. And right now they can't answer that.
Yeah.
And that's not good. Because if I didn't have a customer, my investors would wonder why they were giving me any money.
Absolutely.
So we've got to figure that one out.
Yeah.
But I think there's, as you know, incredibly motivated, hardworking, intelligent people in the VA, and I think they're going to do a great job with this transformation. So I got to get you back to the summit. So let me give you a chance to just anything you're thinking of on your mind, what's in the future for Kendall Krebs, the VA, for ITOPS.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think for the organization, we have to find our evangelists for this change in the organization and find people who can speak to it. And I hear a lot, well, we've got to communicate more, right, in the organization. But I see our leadership doing DevOps days. We have town halls regularly where we're talking about this transformation. And I think, we have to move that conversation across the organization. So managers who are maybe a little less comfortable with some of these topics, staff that are a little bit nervous when, we mention Kubernetes or we start talking about new tools, it's important to have that professional curiosity and really engage in learning about what we're doing and what this means and what roles they might play within that organization. So I think we're at a key moment where we have those pockets of success in the organization. We've got to figure out how to scale it, but we've also got to get the organization talking about this. And it's okay for leaders to stand up and say, I don't have all the answers for exactly how DevSecOps is going to look inside our organization, but that doesn't mean we're not going to figure this out together. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what this means. If we're sitting in one of those technology stovepipes right now in the organization, how are we engaging with the product teams today? What might change in our organization as we move towards DevSecOps? Hey, can we go see what those cool kids did over there and figure out how we can do that as part of our organization? That's really how I think this will eventually come together. And I don't know exactly how it looks at the end, right? There's a ton of people in the organization that are a heck of a lot smarter than me.
No, if you said to me, I know exactly how it's going to look at the end in 5 years, I know you're not telling me the truth.
Right.
Or you're delusional.
Yeah.
Because there's no way you're going to be able to predict that. I just brought up Adam Furtado in the conference up there. He's out of Kessel Run. He started there. And he keeps talking about, in his talks, about how he survived at Kessel Run. Because it was a bold move. And they basically kept on making runway, success, runway, and kept moving it through what he calls the video game of being able to get acceptance, which was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think we've got to do this in an agile way, right? Right now we've got 9 change teams going. I think, we've seen that it's really easy for the change teams to almost accidentally start stepping on each other's toes and then figure that out and figure out, okay, I'm going to focus here, you're going to focus there. This is okay, right? And I might find success in an area that I didn't expect to find the success,
and some teams are splitting up. I mean, are getting to more teams within that team. And some teams will probably die off a little bit, but that's okay. That's agile and adapting, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we gotta embrace it. It's kind of messy.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's good.
Right. Well, let me get you back to the summit. Thank you very much, Kendall, for sharing some of your valuable time. Appreciate it. And by the way, you have an open invitation anytime you want to come back.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Bill.
The Agile Advocate is a production of Government CIO Media and Research. For more podcasts, head to governmentcio.com/podcasts. The Agile Advocate is produced by Amy Kluber. It is hosted by Bill Drew. Edited by Resonate Recordings. Theme music provided by Big Hoax. If you're interested in sponsoring a podcast, contact us at sponsor@governmentcio.com.